You know, we Bidens are like poor relatives. When we get a nice reception like that, we stay, so be careful. Charlie and Laurel, thank you. It's good to be home or almost home. And I also want to congratulate Liz. I'm looking forward to working with you, Liz. I don't know about that Trumka guy. He and I have been friends for years. I called him. I said, congratulations, Mr. President. You still going to talk to me now you're president, a big shot? He said he'd think about it. He told me to call you, Liz. So, congratulations. And Reverend Floyd, pray for me. And Monsignor Gilchrist, good to see you again. And I may need anticipatory absolution here before I begin. So bless me, Father. I'm about to sin. Look, after that speech by Jon Corzine, I should just go out to the beach. I think John said all that had to be said. I'm here for two reasons. The first and foremost reason is to support my friend, Barack's friend, Jon Corzine. We made a decision immediately, early, and without any hesitation that the first guy we committed, we would do anything that we needed to do, that anything he wanted us to do, we would do to help get him reelected. Because this is not only one of the most important states in the Union, this is one of the most consequential governors serving in any state in the Union, and it's critically important he be reelected. And I was telling Monsignor, I was telling John about a true story when I was running for re-election, and I might add, a lot of you helped me through my career. Individually, you in this audience that helped me. I was running for re-election in a tough race, my second race, and it was 1978, and the Senate was just going out of session, and I was in a real rough race. And old Jim Eastland from Mississippi, that old white-haired fellow who was known for his segregationist positions, among others, and he walked up and he said, Joe, he said, how you doing, son? And I said, well, I got a tough race, Mr. Chairman. And he said, what did Jim Eastland do for you in Delaware? And I said, well, some places you'd help, Mr. Chairman, and some places you'd hurt. He said, I'd tell you what, and he always had a big cigar in his mouth, took a cigar out of his mouth. It's an absolutely true story. He said, Joe, son, I'll come to Delaware and campaign for you or against you, whichever will help the most. John, that's my continued promise. I will campaign for you or against you, whichever will help the most. Look, folks, I'm proud to be here with you today. Proud to stand here, as I have, quite frankly, unfortunately, as John pointed out, so many of you know, year after year, over the last 37 years, I've stood at labor rallies and labor conventions and executive committee meetings with New Jersey labor in New Jersey, campaigning with you and for you, and also you campaigning with and for me. As a matter of fact, the truth of the matter is, and this is not hyperbole, I wouldn't be standing here today as Vice President of the United States were it not for your brothers and sisters in Delaware and many of you in this room. The New Jersey AFL-CIO has been my second home. You've been the source of a significant amount of my support for a long time. You literally, not figuratively, have had my back. I don't want to start naming individuals that I can name in this audience and in the state AFL-CIO who have been engaged directly and I would suggest even emotionally in my campaigns, as well as the campaigns for my son to be elected Attorney General of the state of Delaware. So let me begin by simply saying thank you. Thank you for what you've done for me. Thank you for what you did for our ticket this last election. Thank you for what you continue to do for the people of New Jersey and what labor does for this great country. There's an overwhelming reason why I like Jon Corzine. He's one of the guys in our party who never forgot, never was unable to pronounce the word union. 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 I love a lot of my colleagues who talk about working men and women, but can never get the word out. Union. Union. As my Uncle Ed Finnegan from Scranton said, Joey, you're labor from belt buckle to shoe sole. Well, that happens to be the fact. And so is Jon Corzine. You know, folks, Charlie, you and I and your members have gotten along over these years for a whole lot of reasons, starting with our mutual commitment to working men and women in this country, just simply to guarantee them a fair chance. No guarantees. Just give them a fair chance. Because you give our folks a fair chance, they'll do just fine. They'll do just fine. But our relationship didn't end in the trust and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Our relationship went beyond what we stood for. I think we've trusted each other over the years because we have the same ethic, the same passion. We come from the same neighborhood, so to speak. We respect courage, we respect straight talk, and we never leave anybody behind. It's not just about us. Think of all you have done for working men and women who are not part of the labor movement. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not hyperbole to suggest to use that word twice, to suggest that you, American labor, built the middle class in America at the beginning of the 20th century. You were the foundational block upon which the middle class has been built. You know that old expression in my neighborhood in Claymont, you go home with them that brung you to the dance. Well, folks, I'm here to acknowledge you brung me to the dance, and I'm going home with you for my entire career. I just want to thank you. And folks, speaking of straight talk, which I unfortunately have known for, told Barack when he asked me to be vice president, I said, okay, just one thing you got to know. I'm not wearing any funny hats, and I'm not changing my brand. And so, folks, a little bit of straight talk. Let me tell you what Barack and I believe. We believe we need a health care reform in this nation so that people with insurance, like your members, have more security, and people without coverage have a fighting chance to get it. We believe that we need an energy policy in order to be able to sustain our role in the world in the 21st century, a fundamental change in energy policy. We believe that to outcompete the world in the 21st century, which we must do and we have the wherewithal to do, we have to out-educate the world. We believe we can make all that happen. In fact, we believe we must make it happen. Look, we inherited, as John referenced, a god-awful economic situation. What I began to call, as John will remember back in, I think, as early as February, the Great Recession. People initially made fun of me saying the Great Recession. It wasn't an idle phrase. This is the single worst recession we've had, short of a depression. Short of a depression. As a matter of fact, when Barack and I called John in November from Chicago to ask for his advice about our economic plan, and that's literally the case, we were sitting with 25 to 35 economists of all political stripes. And the first discussion we had, Laura, was, when you get in office, are you going to have to first declare a bank holiday? People have short memories, and that's good in one sense. My deceased wife used to say the greatest gift God gave man was the ability to forget. My mother would quickly add, that's true. If it weren't for that, every woman would only have one child. But all kidding aside, how quickly we forget where we were just 8.5 months ago, 9 months ago. When we came in office, there were 40,000 jobs lost the month we were sworn in. Close to 650 the next month. Banks weren't talking about recapitalizing, John, as you educated me. They were talking about closing their doors. Remember all the discussion, John, about how many were so upside down they were literally bankrupt and would need to be closed? We're in the midst of very difficult times. and the frustrating, sometimes frustrating task of climbing out of this recession. Because look, folks, you know, where I come from is like where you come from. It's literally impossible, understandably, to tell a man or woman who just lost their job that things are getting better. Even when we have saved over 1 million jobs in the last 9 months, created or saved. Independent verifiers now, it's not just us. The street, major econometric models are acknowledging that. But I don't blame people for being excited and mad at us. Look, folks, that's part of the role of government. It's part of the role of being vice president. You got to be mad at somebody. It doesn't mean you're opposed to that somebody. I want to tell you something. When they closed down my General Motors plant when I was a senator, they told us it was the last shift. So I went out there at 6 o'clock in the morning like I did when I needed their votes. And I stood there with every shift as they were being not just laid off, their plant was being closed. And they walked by and they grabbed my hand. I reached out my hand and said, damn it, and they pulled their hand away. And they hollered at me and they cursed at me. But 95% of those men and women, before they got halfway across the parking lot, walked back and said, Joe, thanks. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Can you do anything, pal? Can you do anything? People get it. Let's not confuse their anger with what a lot of the conservative pundits think is stupidity. They know where their interests are. You know, my grandpop used to say, John, from Scranton, his name was Ambrose Finnegan, and this is God's truth. He'd say, you know, Joey, when the guy in Manuka, which is a place outside of Scranton, when the guy in Manuka's out of work, it's an economic slowdown. When your brother-in-law is out of work, it's a recession. When you're out of work, it's a depression. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a depression for thousands of your members. It's a depression for millions of Americans who find themselves in this position through no fault of their own. They played by the rules. They showed up. They were productive. And because of the policies, primarily, but not only, of the last 8 years, they got caught in the middle. So, ladies and gentlemen, our #1 job is getting this economy back on track. But, you know, we're not going to measure our success. We're not going to claim success just based on whether the GDP is growing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are technically out of a recession, the experts tell us. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about, the experts are saying there may be actually net growth in the GDP this fourth quarter or the first quarter of next year. But folks, if we come out like we did before, with a growth rate that's significant, but we've left the middle class behind, then that's not success. Barack and I and John agree on a fundamental point, and I want you to hear this straight. It is not enough for the nation to recover based on an econometric model and growth rates of the overall economy. It's not enough that we create jobs. It's necessary we create decent jobs, sustainable jobs. Jobs that allow people to live in a middle-class neighborhood, allow people to feel safe, allow people to have health insurance, allow people to be able to send their kids to school. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we'll measure. Everybody will measure us, and they have a right to measure us any way they want. But that's how Barack and I will measure our success, whether we have in fact begun to rebuild the middle class that you built. You know, again, it means jobs, decent paying jobs. It means if you want to join a union, you should be able to join a union. It's simple. It It means doing all, I love these guys like your opponent who say we should do nothing. It's amazing to me. If it means having to stimulate the economy in order to get our women and men back to work, to give them protection while they're out of work through no fault of their own, if it means that, then that's what we must do, and that's what we're doing. That's why we propose. That's why we proposed. Actually, Jon proposed to me. But that's why we proposed, our administration, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And by the way, I'm not joking when I say the first guy that suggested it to me was Jon in the interregnum period after we were elected, before we were sworn in. He was the guy I went to for advice. This is the guy that argued the strongest because he knows as much as anybody. And look at what it meant for your state. It means that your state, over the 2 years of this act, which we're about 7 months into, you've already gotten commitments for $6 billion. You'll get $17.5 billion in this state because of that Recovery Act. Look, everything's a choice. Just take a look, as Jon referenced, without it, what would have happened with your state budget, which was difficult by any standard. By any standard. And by the way, Jon, no knock on governors, but I love governors. When the economy is going really great, they claim it's all because of what they did in the state. And when it's going wrong, they're right. Usually it's because, unless they've mismanaged it, it's because of powers beyond the control of that state. Even your Republican governor friends are in trouble. It ain't all their fault. This is a worldwide recession you got caught in the middle of. And ladies and gentlemen, look what would have happened. Just look at the numbers. I'm not making these up. In the state of New Jersey, but this is not unusual, other than you're just a big state, 35,000 teachers would not be in a classroom today were it not for that Recovery Act. Unless you decided to increase property taxes in this state by $2 billion to keep them working. What do you think the chances of that were? Ladies and gentlemen, think about it. I could go through, I won't in the interest of time, the number of firefighters, the number of cops, the number of essential services that would not exist today because of the budget dilemma your state and every other state was in, but for this Recovery Act. If you ever wondered, and I know you don't, if you ever wondered whether it mattered who was governor, remember this. If the other guy running was governor, he said, as I read, I'm no expert, but I'm from Delaware, we get your television. You get New York's television. We all get Philly television. Ladies and gentlemen, I may be mistaken, but my recollection is this guy talked about refusing the Recovery Act money. $2 billion more in property taxes, 35,000 fewer teachers, probably close to 1,000 cops and firefighters not being on the job. Imagine where we'd be. Jon Corzine knew that. Jon had the good sense to take the money and put the people in New Jersey to work. Jon estimates, and outside groups estimate, 100,000 jobs have saved or created in the state of New Jersey just in the first 8 months. But a different governor with a different decision would be a different life for over 100,000 people and the people they serve. You know, we used to have a basic bargain in this country, a bargain that existed from the mid-30s all the way up through the 80s and began to wane in the 90s and was eliminated at the turn of the century. And that bargain was simple. It said the people who were responsible for increased productivity in America would benefit from that increased productivity. They'd get a piece of the pie. Well, productivity, because of you and American workers, increased by 20% from the year 2000 to 2007. Yet instead of the middle-class income groups getting a 20% increase in their wages, they actually over that period lost $2,000 on average. 20% increase in productivity, a loss of $2,000 during that period. I don't need to tell you how much pain this economy has caused the families up and down this state. You know the folks who've lost jobs. You know the folks who are staring in the face the prospect of still losing jobs. You know the pain they feel. You know how real it is. That's why we believe it's so important to extend unemployment benefits, to make it possible for folks who have lost their jobs to keep their health care. That's why it's so important, just to keep these men and women from falling into that black abyss. All these guys who so blithely say we shouldn't do this. They've never had a mother or father. They have never themselves lay in bed at night, look over at their wife and husband, staring at the ceiling, wondering, my God, am I going to be able to keep the house? My God, we got married finally, we got a kid in college. Is she going to be able to stay? My God, how are we going to pay for that bill? My God, I hear that water heater clanking. Please, God, don't let it break. Sounds silly, except those of you who know like I do. Sounds silly to people who've never experienced that fear. Ladies and gentlemen, our critics may not have liked what we did, but my response to them is, what would you do? Don't just tell me what I'm doing and what Jon is doing that you don't like. Tell me, what would you do? And ladies and gentlemen, there's been a deafening silence about what they would do. I find it kind of fascinating, as a digression here, I kind of find it fascinating how all of a sudden the guys who've been trying to rip away Medicare for the past 30 years, the guys who are the progeny of the party that was opposed to Social Security creation, opposed to Medicare in the first instance, these are the guys now protecting it against guys like me and Barack. Isn't it fascinating, these guys? I call it shameless. It's absolutely amazing. But ladies and gentlemen, believe me, we know and I know what it's like to lose that job, to have that house foreclosed on. It's not just an economic loss. This is the reason I like this guy. There's a lot of guys who are good men and women who believe and would vote for and would support what Jon stands for. But you know, Charlie, that's not always enough. The reason I like this guy is he understands what you understand. I think it's the reason why we share the same ethic. You understand, as my dad used to say, a job is more than a paycheck. It's about dignity. You understand the psychological and emotional loss for a man or a woman whose whole identity is tied to the fact that they're able to provide for their family, no longer being able to provide for their family. It ain't just the paycheck. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about being able to, you know, my dad had an expression, you know, I believe the longest walk a man or woman can make is up a short flight of stairs to their child's bedroom, to tell their child, honey, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to stay at Cooper School. We're going to have to move. Or I can't keep you in Holy Rosary because we just can't do it anymore. I'm sorry, honey, but you're not going to play in the same Little League team. You got to leave the football team because Dad lost his job. We're about to lose the house, honey. That's the longest walk a man or woman can make in America. And millions of your brothers and sisters, the people we care about, have had to make that walk. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my dad made that walk. I remember it. I didn't realize how traumatic it was because I had such faith in him. I remember walking up the stairs and saying, Champ, Dad's going to have to move to Wilmington for a while, Delaware, from Scranton. because there's no jobs up here, honey. And when we get enough, when I get enough, I'm going to come back and get you and Mom. You're going to stay here with Grandma and Grandpa. It took about a year to get up enough money to get us an apartment called Brookview Apartments in Claymont, Delaware, which ended up being Section 8 housing, but we thought it was just great. There was no Section 8 then. But my dad said with absolute certainty, because he had such faith in this country, I promise you, it's going to be all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what drives me in my career is putting parents in a position to be able to look their kids in the eye. I know this sounds simple, but just to be able to look in the eye and say, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. I promise. That's what drives Jon Corzine. It's not all the sophisticated financial knowledge he has. It's not all his sophistication about international markets and the monetary policy and fiscal policy. It's a simple proposition. What are we here for? Except to make sure your members are able to look their kids in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. And you should ask your brothers and sisters who may be wondering, and you should ask the people whose doors you're knocking on, who is more likely to put New Jersey in a position where the moms and dad of this state, 4 years from now, will be able to look their kids in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be all right. Folks, I know my answer. I know Jon Corzine. I serve with Jon Corzine. We become close friends. He's tough, he's smart, he's honest. He knows more about the economy than 95% of the people in either political party. But to say it again, the most important part that's needed, the thing that is most essential now, is to have somebody in a position of power who understands the pain of the American people and who has a heart that says, I'm willing to risk my career to put the parents of this state in the position of being able to say, honey, it's going to be all right. That's the bottom line. So, folks, I'm betting on Jon Corzine. I'm not just betting on Jon Corzine winning. I'm betting on Jon Corzine being able to stand with Barack and me several years from now and say, not only is this recession over, not only are we growing, not only are we creating jobs, but we are stronger, we're better prepared, we're more certain to be the dominant economy in the world in the 21st century because of what we did. And ladies and gentlemen, you are the key. You are the key to being able to say that, and you're the key to this man getting elected. So go out and get those votes. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.